Hello everyone. My name is Margaрита Rusakova. I am a 7th grade student of Harkiv Gymnasium number 47. My project is devoted to the development of the English language as the object of the study. Today I am going to talk about the periodization of the development itself, and I will tell you about Old English, Middle English, Modern English, and about the Great Vowel Shift. First of all, let's take a look at the periodization. The development of the English language proceeded in three stages. The first one, named Old English. This form of English was spoken from 5th to 11th century AD. The second stage is Middle English, that was spoken from 11th to 15th century AD. And the last but not least, Modern English, that is being used from 15th century AD to present. Before we get started, I have to mention that English had its roots in the languages of the Germanic people of Northern Europe. It causes the similarities between English and many other languages. So, let's take a look at the Old English phase. Old English, or it's also called Anglo-Saxon, is the earliest recorded form of the English language. It was brought to the Great Britain by Anglo-Saxon settlers in the middle of 5th century AD. English wasn't always the main language there. After the Norman conquest, English was replaced for a time by Anglo-Norman as the language of the upper classes. This event is regarded as the end of the Old English era, because during this period the English language was heavily influenced by Anglo-Norman, developing into a phase known as Middle English. At first, Old English was written using a running script called the Fastorg, but it was replaced by a version of the Latin alphabet introduced by Irish missionaries in the 8th century. The introduction of Christianity from around the year 600 encouraged the addition of over 400 Latin loan words into Old English, such as the predecessors of the modern priest, paper, and school. On this slide, you can see an Old English inscription over the arch. This is the Elphick's Colloque, a bilingual guide to learning Latin. Now you can see the Beowulf poem. Middle English is the form of the English language spoken roughly from the time of the Norman conquest in 1066 until the end of the 15th century. For centuries after the conquest, the Norman kings and high-ranking nobles in England spoke Anglo-Norman. Merchants and lower-ranked nobles were often bilingual in Anglo-Norman and English. Meanwhile, English continued to be the language of the common people. Until the 14th century, Anglo-Norman and then French were the languages of the courts and government. Even after the decline of Norman, French retained the status of a prestige language, and about 10,000 French and Norman loanwords entered Middle English, particularly terms associated with government, law, church, the military, fashion, and food. English literature reappeared after 1200 when a changing political climate and the decline in Anglo-Norman made it more respectable. The Provisions of Oxford, released in 1258, was the first English government document to be published in the English language after the Norman conquest. In 1362, Edward III became the first king to address Parliament in English. By the end of the century, even the royal court switched to English. Now you can see a page from Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales, and a page from the Auchinleck manuscript. Modern English is often dated from the Great Vowel Shift, which took place mainly during the 15th century. The Great Vowel Shift was a series of changes in the pronunciation of the English language. Through this vowel shift, the pronunciation of all Middle English long vowels were changed. Some consonant sounds changed as well, particularly those that became silent. The causes of the Great Vowel Shift are unknown, but there are a few theories. The most accepted theory is population migration. The rapid migration of people to the southeast of England following the Black Death produced a clash of dialects that made Londoners distinguish their speech from the immigrants who came from other language cities by changing their vowel system. For example, we'll look at the pronunciation of a few words. In 1300, bite would sound like bait. In 1500, like bait. In 1600, like bait. And only by 1900, bite. The word out would sound more like oot, oat, oat, and only then out. Meat sounded harder, like made, and started with 1500, meat. Boot sounded more like o, like bought, and also starting with 1500, boot. The word meat sounded like made, then made, and meat. Bought sounded more like it's written, bought, bought, bought. The word made sounded like mud, made, and then made. As a result, the language acquired terms such as accent and dialect. As most early phrases came from continental Europe, a few native English letters died out. Obviously, the English language continues to evolve. It should probably not be surprising to see further shortening of words, phrases, and sentences, as we can see today, for example, in chat rooms. I was happy to share this information here, and I hope that it was interesting and will be useful for you. My speech came to the end. I am honestly thankful for your listening. Goodbye.